resistant to the possibility of somebody getting material they could use for weapons. But I think there's tremendous potential for doing that. You need to put the research and development into it. And again, but you should also develop renewable energies and energy efficiency so you don't need so much of it.
Exactly, and I remember the controversy here when we were told we couldn't get the incandescent light bulbs. They were going to be phased out. My God, you'd think we were telling people they couldn't hit their kids anymore. And even here, there was a campaign to reduce shower nozzle pressure so that we're using less hot water. Again, the same thing. People are outraged. So I think we've got a little bit of a way to go to convince people about that kind of thing. But on that great picture, it is going to be the Chinas, the Indias, I guess the Europe and America that really have to make those big changes with their power. Do you think it doesn't really matter what we do down here? You know, China's got so much emissions. India's wanting to, have more.
Well, yeah, but it does matter what is done down here. You know, I was told about how much coal there is in the lignite, and we calculated that if we continue on business as usual and drive even 20% of the species to extinction, the number that would be associated, and if the lignite coal were part of that this century providing energy, it would amount to a few thousand species. You know, so it's something to think about. Maybe you think, well, it's some insects, or something. We don't know which species should be blamed on which country, which contributed part of it. But, you're talking not an insignificant number. And the other thing is, well, I've been going to different countries, trying to find some country which will stand up and have a leader that tells you the truth and which then takes an energy pathway that's consistent with avoiding climate change and other environmental impacts. And so far, it's very difficult to find anyone who will stop this fossil fuel freight train.
Because that's really what it takes, isn't it? Just takes, a few little countries here and there, perhaps the small ones, that just stand up and go, no more. Just because we've got coal doesn't mean we're going to ship it overseas and sell it. Just because I've got a penis doesn't mean I'm going to go and get all rapey. It's the same thing, really, isn't it?
Right.
Well, it's not really the same thing, but... It's what I mean. We don't need to, but we can leave that in the ground and we can look at making money as an economy in a completely different kind of manner.
Yeah.
Probably best that you don't use that analogy when you go back to the States. Unless you work for the World Bank. Who, it has to be said, and it is might be an odd way to segue into the bankers. It strikes me when we're thinking about what countries can do with cap and trade and various things, that having read a lot of the stuff, it seems to me that the people who are going to benefit from something like cap and trade, it's going to be the Wall Streets, or as they say in the street, it's going to be Wall Street, not Main Street. So in terms of the cap and trade, or the other one that you've mooted, fee and dividend, a little country like New Zealand putting their hand up and going, actually, we think this is the way to go. Is that enough to start that momentum?
Yeah, it's... I couldn't talk about this on David Letterman, but let me...
I'm not David Letterman.
The thing is that it's as... certain as the law of gravity. As long as fossil fuels are the cheapest energy, then somebody will burn them. But the reason that they're cheapest is partly because governments subsidize them and because they do not have to pay their cost to society. So there are more than 1 million people a year that die of air and water pollution. Most of that is from fossil fuels. And a much larger number of people who have asthma or other things which are other health problems that are due to fossil fuels. But that cost is borne entirely by the public. The fossil fuel companies don't pay you if you get asthma. And the damage to the environment, the damage to the future of young people, the climate change, the impacts of climate change, that also is not paid for by, so that should all be built into the cost of fossil fuels.
And it should be built into it at the source.
Yeah, so what we should do is we should add a fee which is collected from the fossil fuel companies at the domestic mine or the port of entry, and the money that is collected should be distributed to the public on a per capita basis. That's what I call the dividend. It should be given monthly as an electronic transfer to your bank account, or if you don't have a bank account, to your debit card. And then the people who do a better than average in using less than average fossil fuels, I mean, it will increase the price of energy from fossil fuels. But the people who use less than average will actually get more in the dividend than they pay in increased energy prices. And if that cost, if that fee goes up over time, then renewable energies and energy efficiency will take over for the fossil fuels, and we will move to the clean energy future of the clean energy of the future, which is what we need to do. And that would be it would allow a smooth transition to that, because you can't suddenly stop fossil fuels. You've got to have a procedure that will allow you to do it economically over time.
Yeah, and it's a fairly controversial kind of scheme. Is it? They have something similar in Alaska, I believe?
No, Alaska gives you a dividend, but they're just taking it from the fossil fuel that's sold. But it has been tried in British Columbia in Canada, and it's worked very well there.
I know it has been one of the more controversial of the things, because people are going, oh, how can you instigate that? How can you get people to, get their bank accounts on it? And there was a wonderful quote that you're probably familiar with from Elizabeth Colbert from the New Yorker, who said, I view Jim Hansen as heroic as a scientist, but I wish he would stick to what he really knows, because I don't think he has a realistic idea of what is politically possible. That's not only from the New Yorker, but also you can find that in the dictionary under patronizing. Isn't that part of the problem in some ways? People go, oh, it's not politically possible. You can't do that. Is it because we're not willing to sort of look outside the sphere and go, actually, we can make these changes?
The problem is that the laws of physics don't go by politics. They are what they are.
That's his problem.
And what is possible depends upon what the people demand, I think. And politicians will follow if we make this clear enough. But we have to have enough people, and that's why it's so great to see so many people here today.
Before we bring on the youth panel, who have got some questions from young people, it's the end of your trip here to New Zealand. You're about to go on board a plane and head back to the States. A quick summation of what you've seen and what you think about what is happening here.
Well, first of all, the country is remarkable, remarkably beautiful country, and this is really the kind of nature that we have to preserve. And it's great that people recognize that. And I just hope now that we can help them understand that we can't burn all the fossil fuels, or this country and all the others are going to be in trouble. The turnout here, I think, has been better than any place that I've seen. So I'm really hopeful that this can be a country that helps lead the rest of the world in the right direction.
Marvellous. It certainly won't happen if most people sort of just stay at home and don't become involved. And there are some workshops on that this afternoon. If there was one thing you think that you could insist that people really pay attention to as the key issue, perhaps here in New Zealand at the moment, what would that be? Would it be the lignite?
In New Zealand, the key issue is the lignite. Although, in general, we should not be going after the last drop of oil in the deepest ocean. We've got to move on. We have to move on to the post-fossil fuel era. So, but then to do that, we've got to get people to understand there's got to be a fee on carbon, and the money has to go to the public so that they're able to make the changes.
Righto, bravo. Because as you said, there's one thing before, if we do nothing, you said we need to think about the Venus syndrome if we're not doing anything. What is the Venus syndrome? Is that the clouds' effects on Venus, or do we need to...
Well, yeah, Venus once had an ocean. When Venus was young and our sun was dimmer, early in the solar system's history, Venus had an ocean, and as the sun got brighter, the water began to evaporate, and we got a runaway greenhouse effect on Venus. So now the temperature on the surface is 600 degrees, and all the carbon dioxide's been baked into the atmosphere, and no one can live there. Well, there's the danger. If we burn all the fossil fuels, and if that causes the methane hydrates, the frozen methane, to melt in the Arctic, on the continental shelves and in the tundra, then there's a danger we could cause a runaway greenhouse effect on this planet. That will exterminate the politicians, but everybody else at the same time.
Well, I think that's a risk we're prepared to take. Just before we go as well, you used the word danger several times in that last statement, and it was one of the words that was removed from some of your discussions. You know, you've had the word danger censored from things that you're doing, whether through NASA or various other policies. Has that censorship thing changed? Are governments less keen to sort of censor what you're saying now? Is that still going on in some way or other?
Well, since I informed the New York Times and it became a big issue, I'm able to speak my mind. I do have to make clear, though.
Which is the same newspaper which uses the word enhanced interrogation as opposed to torture. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
an establishment that's not averse to censoring itself. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I have to qualify what I say, and this is my personal opinion. I'm not speaking as a government. I am a government employee, but I'm giving my personal opinions.
That will go no further than this room, other than to tell a couple of people that this is what James said, as a person, as a citizen.
Right. Yeah, right.
I feel as if somehow I've censored him. Awkward. So you were going to say, as a person?
Yes, yeah. I mean, we all have a right to say what we think. You know, frankly, even in your country, we have a fellow out here by the name of Jim Salinger who I think got fired for saying he's sacrificed more than I have. He's sacrificed his job, and that's happened in Australia, in government scientists. So it's, we think we have free countries, but if you say things which make the powers that be unhappy, and it really is the people who are gaining from fossil fuels that are kind of have enormous influence in our governments. That's the thing that I'm surprised in going around the world. I thought it was, I knew in our country, I say the politicians are well-oiled and coal-fired because they get so much money from this fossil fuel industry. But I found that's true in most countries. It may be less true here, but when scientists get fired for saying something that is drawing attention to the global warming, then, there is something wrong.
Hear, hear. All right. So one way to stop that influence, I guess, is to stop the money that's flowing into their coffers by, having the fee or stopping a lot of the stuff being hauled out of the ground. So when you're standing out there on a cold picket line in a froggy sort of Southland morning. Think about that. You're not only stopping the export of that lignite, you're helping to reduce the sort of, in some ways, the power of those interest groups, special interest groups. We've now got some young people who are going to come on stage.